I arrived at my only son's wedding, at an exclusive country club in Connecticut, my hands trembling as I clutched the card table number they'd mailed me. Before I could enter the ballroom, Brandon's bride Natalie cornered me in the marble lobby. Her face was cold, diamonds glittering at her throat. She leaned close and hissed, "You'll sit in the back corner, alone. Your shabby suit and poverty will embarrass us in front of our guests." My heart shattered as I watched my son Brandon stand silently behind her, avoiding my eyes. I'd spent 40 years working double shifts to give him everything. Now I was being hidden like a shameful secret. The ballroom was spectacular. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, and white roses covered every surface. 300 guests filled rows of gilded chairs, their designer clothes and jewelry sparkling under the soft lighting. I made my way to table 47 in the very back corner, surrounded by empty chairs. Everyone else sat in clusters near the front, laughing and chatting. I was an island of one. I watched Brandon greet guests near the entrance. He was 34 now, wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than I made in 3 months of construction work. He looked confident, successful, completely at ease in this world of wealth. He looked nothing like the boy I'd raised. My mind drifted back through the decades. 43 years I'd worked construction. Started when I was 22, right after marrying Emma. We had Brandon 2 years later, and I promised myself he'd have opportunities we never had. So I worked. Morning shifts pouring concrete, evening shifts doing drywall. Weekends I did roofing repairs. My body paid the price. But Brandon got his college education at the state university. He got his business degree, his nice apartment, his entry into the corporate world. Emma died when Brandon was 19. Cancer took her fast and mean. In her final weeks, holding my hand in that hospital room, she made me promise to take care of our boy, to make sure he made something of himself. I kept that promise. Even after she was gone, even when the medical bills nearly drowned me, I kept working, kept sending Brandon money when he needed it for graduate school, for his first suit, for his security deposit on that apartment in Hartford. The ceremony began. A string quartet played something classical that I didn't recognize. Natalie walked down the aisle on her father's arm. Carlton Ashford was a prominent attorney, tall and distinguished with silver hair and a suit that screamed money. He beamed with pride as he gave his daughter away. I waited for my moment. In every wedding I'd ever attended, both parents walked the groom down the aisle, or at least sat in the front row. But when Brandon took his place at the altar, he walked alone. The officiant mentioned Natalie's parents by name, thanking them for their generosity and love. Brandon's parents weren't mentioned at all. It was as if I didn't exist, as if Emma had never existed. The ceremony ended with cheers and applause. Guests moved to the reception area where waiters circulated with champagne and appetizers that looked like tiny works of art. I stayed at my table, watching from a distance. A server eventually brought me a plate. Cold chicken, some kind of rice pilaf, and green beans that had lost their warmth. I picked at it, my appetite gone. That's when she appeared. An elegant woman in her early 60s approached my table. She wore a navy dress that fit perfectly, a pearl necklace, and carried herself with the kind of confidence that comes from belonging in places like this. Her hair was styled in a sophisticated silver bob, and her makeup was understated but flawless. She sat down in the chair beside me and said softly, "Act like you're with me." I blinked, confused. "Ma'am, I think you're at the wrong table. This is table 47. I'm sure your assigned seat is up front with the other guests." She smiled warmly, her blue eyes twinkling. "No, Stephen. I'm exactly where I need to be. Just follow my lead and laugh like I said something charming." I started to ask how she knew my name, but she touched my arm gently and laughed, as if I'd just told a delightful story. Her performance was so natural that I found myself smiling despite my confusion. Then I saw Brandon approaching our table. He held a champagne glass, and his expression was casual, like he was just making rounds to greet guests. But as he got closer and saw me sitting with this elegant woman who was laughing warmly, his face drained of all color. He stopped a few feet from our table, staring. I could see him trying to place her, recognition flickering in his eyes, but not quite catching. "I see you've met our dear family friend Stephen," Brandon said, his voice strained. "Such a generous donor to our favorite charities." The words hit me like a punch. Family friend? Donor? Not father, not dad, just Stephen, some vague acquaintance. I opened my mouth to correct him, to say what I should have said the moment Natalie ordered me to sit alone, but the woman beside me squeezed my hand under the table, a gentle warning. She turned to Brandon with a gracious smile. "Yes, Stephen and I go way back. We were just discussing his late wife, Emma. What a remarkable woman she was." Brandon's eyes went wide. His face shifted from pale to gray. "You knew Emma?" Before she could answer, Carlton Ashford appeared, drawn by the conversation. He studied the woman beside me, his attorney's mind clearly working to place her. Then recognition dawned across his features. "Margaret Hartwell?" he said, his voice rising with excitement. "The Margaret Hartwell from Hartwell Development Corporation?" Margaret nodded politely. "Guilty as charged, Carlton." "Lovely wedding." I watched Brandon's face transform from gray to green. This woman sitting beside me, treating me with warmth and respect, was apparently someone very important. Someone his new father-in-law desperately wanted to impress. Carlton practically glowed. "Mrs. Hartwell, what an honor. I had no idea you were acquainted with the Ashford family. Or with Stephen here." He glanced at me with new interest, clearly reassessing who I might be if Margaret Hartwell considered me worth her time. "Stephen and I have a long history," Margaret said smoothly. "I'm actually here more for him than anyone else." Brandon's champagne glass trembled in his hand. He excused himself quickly, mumbling something about greeting other guests, and disappeared into the crowd. Carlton lingered, trying to make small talk with Margaret about a development deal his firm was brokering. She remained gracious but non-committal, deflecting his attempts to discuss business. Finally, he took the hint and moved on, but not before pressing his business card into her hand. As soon as we were alone again, I turned to Margaret. "Who are you? How do you know my name? How did you know about Emma?" She smiled sadly. "All in good time, Stephen. But first, I think your son wants another word with you. And this time, he won't be so polite." Sure enough, within minutes, Brandon reappeared. His casual facade had cracked. His jaw was tight, his eyes hard. He grabbed my arm, not gently. Outside, he hissed in my ear. "Now." Margaret released my hand and nodded slightly, as if giving me permission to go. I stood and followed Brandon through the ballroom, past tables of laughing guests who had no idea what was happening. We walked down a marble hallway lined with oil paintings of past country club presidents. Brandon pulled me into a small alcove near the coat check, away from any guests. The moment we were alone, he exploded. His voice was a harsh whisper, but the rage was unmistakable. "What are you doing? How do you know Margaret Hartwell? Did you scheme this? Did you embarrass me by begging some rich woman to sit with you and make me look bad?" I stared at my son, this stranger in expensive clothes. "I don't know her, Brandon. She just sat down beside me. She seems to know who I am, but I've never met her before in my life." "Then why is she here? Why is she sitting with you?" "I don't know." My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. "But Brandon, why did you lie? Why did you tell people I'm a family friend and not your father?" His face hardened. The rage shifted into something colder, more calculated. "Because Natalie's family can't know the truth about where I came from. Do you understand? They think I'm from old money, that I went to private schools in New England, that my family has connections and history. They think I'm one of them." The words settled over me like a heavy blanket. "You're ashamed of me. I'm protecting my future," he snapped. "Do you know what it's like trying to make it in this world when you come from nothing? When your father is a construction worker who smells like sawdust and concrete?" When your mother died without life insurance and left you with nothing but debt? Each word was a knife. Your mother and I gave you everything we had. You gave me scraps, Brandon said coldly. I made myself into something. I got myself through college. I built my career. I networked. I impressed the right people. I clawed my way into rooms where people like us don't belong. And I'm not going to let you ruin it by showing up here, reminding everyone that I come from poverty. Brandon, I said, my voice breaking. I'm your father. You were my father, he corrected. Past tense. The person I am now doesn't have room for what you represent. I felt something inside me crumble. This wasn't anger talking, or stress from the wedding. This was calculated. This was who my son had become. Your mother would be heartbroken, I whispered. Brandon's face twisted. Don't you dare bring her into this. You couldn't even keep her alive. You couldn't afford proper treatment, proper doctors. She died because we were poor, and I swore I'd never be poor again. Never be weak like you. The cruelty of it stole my breath. Before I could respond, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Margaret appeared, her elegant composure now replaced with cold authority. Brandon Cartwright, she said, her voice cutting through the tension. Or should I say Brandon Morrison? Interesting that you're using your mother's maiden name now. Brandon spun to face her. Who told you that? How do you know my real name? Margaret stepped closer, her heels clicking on the marble floor. I know quite a bit about you, Brandon, including that I'm the primary investor in the Riverside Towers project your father-in-law's firm is handling. $78 million I've committed to that development. Would be a shame if I pulled my funding, because the attorney's new son-in-law was caught treating an elderly gentleman with cruelty and disrespect. The color drained from Brandon's face again. $78 million. His new father-in-law's major project. The kind of deal that could make or break a law firm's year. You wouldn't, Brandon said, but his voice lacked conviction. Try me, Margaret replied calmly. I've built my career on integrity and loyalty, two things you seem to lack entirely. Brandon looked between us, calculating. I could see his mind working, trying to find an angle, a way to manipulate this situation. Finally, he backed down, holding up his hands in a gesture of surrender. I apologize, he said stiffly. The stress of the wedding. I didn't mean what I said, but as he turned to leave, I caught the look in his eyes. It wasn't remorse. It wasn't shame. It was calculation. He was already planning his next move, figuring out how to manage this threat. Margaret and I watched him disappear back into the reception. Music and laughter drifted down the hallway, a stark contrast to what had just happened. Thank you, I said quietly. But you didn't have to threaten him on my behalf. Oh, Stephen, Margaret said, her stern expression softening. I'm not doing this just for you. I'm doing it for Emma. Margaret excused herself to make a phone call, leaving me standing alone in that marble hallway. I should have left right then. Should have walked out of the country club, driven my old truck home, and never looked back. But some foolish part of me hoped that Brandon's apology, however forced, meant something. I returned to the reception, but Margaret's chair at table 47 remained empty. I sat alone again, watching the celebration continue around me. Brandon and Natalie had their first dance to some romantic song I didn't recognize. They looked perfect together, like a photograph from a wedding magazine. I was contemplating leaving when Natalie appeared beside my table. She smiled brightly, but it didn't reach her eyes. For the benefit of any nearby guests, she played the gracious bride. Stephen, would you mind joining me for a moment? I'd love to show you the gift display. It wasn't a request. I followed her through a side door into a private sitting room decorated in cream and gold. The moment the door closed behind us, her smile vanished. Let's talk plainly, she said, crossing her arms. You're a problem. I said nothing, just waited. Brandon told me everything after your little confrontation in the hallway. About Margaret Hartwell, about her threats. I'll be honest with you, Stephen. My father is desperate to keep Margaret happy. That Riverside Towers deal is the biggest project his firm has handled in 5 years. If she pulls her investment because of you, It would be catastrophic. Because of me? I said. I didn't do anything. Your husband is the one who lied about who I am. Natalie waved her hand dismissively. Semantics. Here's the truth, Stephen. Brandon told my family you died 10 years ago, in a construction accident. He said he was an orphan from a wealthy but tragic background, raised by a family trust fund that paid for his education. The room seemed to tilt. He told you I was dead? Not just told us. He had documentation. My father did a background check before we got engaged, standard procedure for our family. Brandon showed us a death certificate, insurance paperwork, everything. It all checked out. My legs felt weak. I sat down on one of the cream-colored chairs. That's impossible. I've been alive this whole time. I saw Brandon twice last year. We had dinner together in Hartford. And he kept you carefully hidden, Natalie continued. No photos on social media. Never mentioned you to colleagues or friends. When he got serious with me 2 years ago, he simply eliminated you from his story. Created a whole new history for himself. She pulled out her phone, tapped a few times, then showed me the screen. There it was. A death certificate with my name. Stephen James Cartwright. Date of death listed as March 14th, 2015. Cause of death. Workplace accident. Multiple trauma. It looked official, complete with a state seal and everything. I felt sick. My own son had declared me legally dead. How? I whispered. Does it matter? Natalie asked. The point is, you're causing problems. Brandon's carefully constructed identity is crumbling. My father is asking questions. Margaret Hartwell is hovering like some avenging angel. And I won't let you destroy what we've built. What you've built on lies, I said. On ambition, she corrected. Brandon wanted to be someone. He made it happen. Yes, he bent some rules, but who doesn't? The difference between successful people and failures is that successful people do whatever it takes. She sat down across from me, her wedding dress rustling. Here's what's going to happen, Stephen. You're going to leave. Tonight. Tell anyone who asks that you're not feeling well. If you stay, if you contradict the story Brandon's told, everything falls apart. The wedding becomes a scandal. His position at my father's firm evaporates. Our prenuptial agreement has a morality clause. Everything gets voided if either of us committed fraud before the marriage. My father will destroy Brandon for making our family look foolish. Maybe he deserves to be destroyed, I said quietly. Natalie smiled, but it was sharp. Maybe. But are you the kind of father who destroys his own son? She reached into a small purse, pulled out a folded check, and placed it on the table between us. I could see the amount even from where I sat. $50,000. This is more money than you've probably saved in your entire life, she said. Take it. Disappear. Go back to whatever small town you live in. Brandon will send you a monthly allowance if you agree to stay away permanently. $500 a month, deposited directly into your account. All you have to do is sign this. She produced a document from her purse, several pages stapled together. Even without my reading glasses, I could make out the header, Non-Disclosure Agreement and Settlement of Family Claims. It's simple, Natalie explained. You agree never to contact Brandon directly, never to reveal your relationship to anyone. If asked, you'll say you're a distant family acquaintance, nothing more. In exchange, you get the $50,000 now, plus $500 a month for life. I stared at the check. $50,000. It was more than I made in 2 years of construction work. With my Social Security, it would mean security for the first time since Emma died. No more worrying about how to pay for my heart medication. No more choosing between groceries and the electric bill. And if I don't sign? Natalie's expression hardened. Then Brandon loses everything. His career, his reputation, possibly his freedom if my father pursues fraud charges, and he'll hate you forever for it. Every day for the rest of his life, he'll know his father ruined him. Is that what you want, Stephen? To be the villain in your son's story? The manipulation was perfect. She'd framed it as a choice between being a loving father who sacrifices for his son's happiness or a vindictive old man who destroys his child's future out of spite. I picked up the check with trembling hands. $50,000. My ticket to peace and security. "I need to think about this," I said. "You have until the end of the reception," Natalie replied, standing. "After that, the offer expires. And Stephen, if you say anything to anyone, especially Margaret Hartwell, the deal is off. This stays between us." She left me alone in that cream and gold room, holding a check and a contract that would erase me from my son's life permanently. I sat in that room for 20 minutes, staring at the check. The logical part of my brain said to take it, sign the papers, walk away. I'd already lost Brandon. At least this way, I'd have something to show for 40 years of sacrifice. But Emma's voice echoed in my memory. I could hear her in that hospital room, weak from chemo, holding my hand. "Make sure he's a good man, Stephen. Not just a successful man. A good man." I'd failed. Somewhere along the way, I'd taught Brandon that success mattered more than character, that money mattered more than integrity. Maybe by sacrificing everything, by never demanding respect or acknowledgement, I'd taught him I was worthless. I stood up, unsigned papers in hand, and walked toward the lobby. I'd decided. I would sign. I would take the money. I would let Brandon have his perfect life, because destroying him wouldn't bring back the son I'd lost. That boy was already gone. Margaret was waiting in the lobby, near the grand staircase. She saw me coming, saw the papers in my hand, and stepped into my path. "Going somewhere, Stephen?" "I have to leave," I said. "It's complicated. Thank you for your kindness, but I don't belong here." "Before you go," Margaret said gently, "I need to tell you something. I knew your wife." I stopped. "What?" "Emma Morrison and I were roommates at UConn. Spring semester of 1978. She was studying education. I was in the business school. We were close for those few years, like sisters, really. Then we graduated, and life pulled us in different directions. I got caught up building my career, traveling for work, networking. I always meant to reconnect with her, but I kept putting it off. Always one more deal, one more acquisition, one more business trip." Margaret's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't let them fall. 23 years ago, I was reading the newspaper over breakfast. I saw an obituary. Emma Morrison Cartwright. Cancer. Age 44. Survived by husband Stephen and son Brandon, 19. My throat tightened. I remembered that day, writing out the obituary at the funeral home, choosing which words could possibly capture who Emma had been. "I went to the funeral," Margaret continued. "You wouldn't remember me. There were so many people there. Emma touched so many lives. But I stood in the back and watched you hold Brandon, both of you shattered. I saw how you kept your arm around him, kept him standing when he could barely hold himself up. And I promised Emma's memory something that day. I'd watch over her family, make sure her boys were okay." "You've been watching us?" I asked, stunned. "From a distance. I built my company partially as a tribute to Emma's belief in me. She always said I'd do great things, that I had a gift for seeing potential. When I heard Brandon was getting married, I started paying closer attention. And Stephen, I found something." She pulled a manila folder from her designer handbag. Emma had a life insurance policy through the school district where she worked. Not much, $75,000. But according to her will, which I was able to obtain through some legal channels, that money wasn't designated for Brandon's education. It went into a trust fund for your retirement and medical care. I stared at her. I never saw any of that money. The insurance barely covered her funeral costs. Margaret opened the folder, showing me documents, bank statements, trust fund paperwork, transaction records. That's because Brandon accessed the trust fund when he turned 25. He had legal authority as the secondary trustee, a provision meant for emergencies if you became incapacitated. Instead, on his 25th birthday, he filed paperwork claiming you were mentally unfit due to grief and depression. He got temporary control of the trust and drained the entire amount. She showed me the withdrawal records. $75,000, plus 9 years of modest growth and interest. Total amount withdrawn, $93,417. He used it to create his new identity, Margaret explained. Designer clothes, luxury car lease, down payment on an expensive apartment in Hartford. Everything to infiltrate Natalie's social circle. To present himself as someone from wealth. I looked at the signatures on the authorization forms. Someone had forged my name, made it look like I'd approved the withdrawal. He didn't just lie about who he is, Margaret said quietly. He stole your wife's final gift to you. The money she wanted you to use for your heart condition, for the medical care you desperately need. I sank onto a lobby bench. My heart condition. I'd been putting off seeing a cardiologist for 3 years because I couldn't afford it. The chest pains were getting worse, the shortness of breath more frequent. But I'd told myself I could manage, could wait until I qualified for better Medicare coverage. All this time there'd been money, Emma's money. Money she'd set aside specifically for my health, and Brandon had stolen it to buy designer suits. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because you're about to sign away your rights," Margaret said, nodding at the papers in my hand. "Natalie made you an offer, didn't she? Money in exchange for silence?" I nodded. "Don't do it, Stephen. Brandon doesn't deserve your protection. And more importantly, Emma doesn't deserve to have her final wish ignored. She wanted you taken care of. Let me help you fight for what's rightfully yours." I looked at the unsigned NDA in my hands, then at the bank records showing my son's theft. Emma's face floated in my memory, smiling, always believing the best in people. "What would fighting back even look like?" I asked. Margaret's expression hardened. "It looks like the truth. All of it. Public and undeniable." Margaret and I walked back into the reception together. The party was in full swing. Guests danced to a live band playing upbeat covers of classic songs. The bar was crowded with people getting refills of expensive liquor. Brandon and Natalie held court near the cake table, accepting congratulations from a circle of admirers. My hands shook, but my resolve was solid. Emma had saved that money by living frugally, by working extra tutoring hours when her teaching salary wasn't enough, by sacrificing her own needs so Brandon and I would be cared for. Brandon had stolen that sacrifice and used it to pretend he was something he wasn't. I walked straight to where Brandon stood, Margaret's folder tucked under my arm. Several of Natalie's relatives were mid-conversation, laughing about some story Carlton was telling. I interrupted. "Brandon, we need to talk. Now. In front of everyone." The laughter died. Brandon turned, his face shifting from jovial to alarmed in an instant. "Dad, this isn't the time." The word slipped out before he could stop it. "Dad." A woman in a purple dress nearby looked confused. "I thought you said your father passed away years ago." Brandon's face went red. This is Stephen. He's a different relation. He's confused sometimes. Early dementia issues." The lie came so easily. I'd expected it, but it still stung. "I don't have dementia, Brandon," I said loudly enough for the growing circle of onlookers to hear. "I have perfect clarity about what you've done." I pulled out the folder Margaret had given me and opened it. "I have documentation here showing that you stole $93,000 from a trust fund your mother set up for my medical care. You forged my signature, claimed I was mentally unfit, and drained the account to finance your fake identity." Carlton Ashford pushed through the crowd, his attorney instincts activated. "Gentlemen, perhaps we should take this somewhere private." "No," I said firmly. "You deserve to know who your daughter married. Brandon isn't who he claims to be." Brandon's desperation was palpable. "Dad, please. You'll ruin everything. Is that what you want? To destroy me?" Then his tactics shifted. His eyes filled with tears. His voice broke. He turned to the gathered guests and created a performance worthy of an award. "I'm sorry, everyone. My father has struggled since my mother died. He became fixated on money, always saying I owed him, that I stole from him. I've tried to help him, Sent him money, tried to get him proper care, but he refuses treatment. He gambles away everything I give him." The words hung in the air. Several guests looked at me with pity. Brandon was painting me as a mentally ill, gambling-addicted old man who was having a breakdown at his son's wedding. "I didn't want to tell anyone because it's so painful," Brandon continued, his voice thick with manufactured emotion. "He's all I have left of my mother, but the disease has taken him from me." It was brilliant manipulation. Several people reached out to touch Brandon's shoulder sympathetically. Natalie's mother, Patricia Ashford, approached me with gentle concern. "Sir, perhaps you should rest. This is clearly a stressful day for you." 2 country club security guards appeared at the edge of the crowd, summoned by someone. Carlton took the folder from my trembling hands. "I'll review these documents," he said in a placating tone. "But right now, Stephen, you're causing a disturbance. I think it's best if you leave. These guards will escort you out." I felt everything slipping away. Brandon's lies were more convincing than my truth. The guards moved toward me. Then Margaret stepped forward. "Actually, Carlton, you'll want to review those documents immediately. They're quite revelatory and legally actionable." Carlton paused, looked at Margaret with new attention. She commanded respect in a way I never could. "Those papers contain evidence of banking fraud, identity fraud, and elder financial abuse," Margaret continued calmly. "Brandon forged his father's signature to steal money from a trust fund. He falsified a death certificate to hide Stephen's existence from your family. And he attempted to defraud you by misrepresenting his background and financial history." Carlton opened the folder and began reading. His expression changed from polite concern to professional scrutiny. Other attorneys at the wedding, several of Carlton's colleagues, moved closer to see. Brandon tried to leave, but Carlton's voice stopped him cold. "Don't move." The 2 words carried absolute authority. Carlton flipped through pages, his face darkening with each one. He showed several documents to a colleague, who nodded grimly. "Margaret, is all of this verified?" Carlton asked. "Every document has been authenticated by forensic accountants and legal experts," Margaret replied. "I took the liberty of having it all reviewed before coming here today. The signatures are forgeries. The death certificate is fraudulent. The trust fund theft is documented through bank records that show Brandon's account receiving multiple large deposits, matching withdrawal dates from Stephen's trust." Natalie appeared beside Brandon, her face pale. "Carlton, what's going on?" Her father looked at her with something I'd never seen a father direct at his child. Profound disappointment. "Your husband," Carlton said heavily, "appears to have committed multiple felonies." Carlton demanded his private office at the country club. The reception continued without us, guests dancing and drinking, unaware that the wedding party had imploded. Brandon, Natalie, Margaret, and I followed Carlton down another marble hallway to a richly appointed study the club kept for member use. Carlton spread Margaret's documents across a mahogany desk. His colleague, another attorney named Richard, who'd been a guest, joined us. Both men examined the papers with professional intensity. Brandon stood near the door, looking like he might bolt at any moment. Natalie sat in a leather chair, her wedding dress pooling around her, her face a mask of shock. "These documents appear authentic," Richard said after several minutes. He looked at Brandon. "The forensic analysis of the signatures on these trust fund documents shows they don't match other examples of Stephen's signature. But they do share characteristics with your handwriting, Brandon." "Those documents are fabricated," Brandon said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Margaret has some grudge. She's trying to ruin me." Carlton looked up sharply. "Margaret Hartwell is one of the most respected business leaders in the Northeast. Her reputation is beyond reproach. Yours, however, is now in serious question." He held up another document. "This death certificate for Stephen Cartwright, dated March 2015. You showed this to me during our background check before your engagement to Natalie. Where did you obtain it?" Brandon's silence was damning. Natalie found her voice. "Brandon, is any of this true? Did you steal from your father?" "It's not stealing," Brandon said desperately. That money was wasted sitting in a trust fund. Mom would have wanted me to use it to better myself, to escape that working-class existence. I was honoring her memory by making something of myself. Your mother wanted me taken care of, I said quietly. Every eye turned to me. She knew I had a heart condition from 40 years of physical labor. She knew I'd need medical care. That money was supposed to pay for my health, maybe my surgery, maybe to keep me alive. You took your dying father's healthcare money to impress a rich girl. The words landed like stones in water, rippling outward. Natalie's hand went to her mouth. Carlton picked up his phone and dialed. Jerry? Carlton Ashford. I need you to look into something. Potential banking fraud, identity fraud, falsified legal documents. I'm sending over some material. I need to know if this is civilly actionable, possibly criminal. You can't do this, Brandon said, panic rising in his voice. We're family now. Think about Natalie. Think about our future children, your grandchildren. Natalie stood up. Her hands shook as she reached for her engagement ring, a 6-carat diamond that probably cost more than my truck was worth. She pulled it off and placed it on Carlton's desk. We're not family, she said, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. We're not anything. Natalie, please, Brandon begged. I love you. Everything I did was to be worthy of you. You lied to me, she said, about everything. Your background, your family, your character. I don't even know who you are. Patricia Ashford appeared in the doorway, drawn by the tension. Carlton, what's happening? Half the reception is asking where the bride and groom went. Carlton stood, his face grim. The wedding is off, Patricia. Irreconcilable issues have come to light. Patricia's eyes widened. Off? Carlton, we have 300 guests out there. Then we'll make an announcement. The marriage is annulled immediately on grounds of fraud. We can't annul it yet, Richard interjected. They're legally married as of the ceremony. Then we'll file for annulment first thing Monday morning, Carlton said. The grounds are clear. Fraud in the inducement. Natalie entered this marriage based on material misrepresentations about Brandon's identity and character. He turned to Brandon, his attorney persona fully engaged. As of this moment, you're terminated from Ashford Legal Group. Security will escort you from the premises. You should retain legal counsel immediately. My firm will be pursuing full restitution on Stephen's behalf for the stolen trust fund money. Brandon's face cycled through emotions: fear, anger, desperation, calculation. He turned to me one last time. Dad, please, tell them you forgive me. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. You love me, right? You wouldn't let them destroy me over some money. The manipulation was naked now. My love for him, weaponized one final time. I do love you, Brandon, I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, he was still my son. I always will. But I can't save you from the consequences of your choices anymore. Your mother taught you better than this. I taught you better than this. Or at least, I tried to. Margaret spoke for the first time since we'd entered the office. There's more, Carlton. 6 months ago, Brandon approached my company claiming he could provide inside access to Ashford Legal's negotiation strategies for the Riverside Towers project. He wanted a finder's fee, $50,000 in exchange for confidential information about his future father-in-law's legal approach. Carlton's face went from grim to furious. That's a clear breach of attorney-client privilege. That's grounds for disbarment if you were actually admitted to the bar. Are you even a licensed attorney, Brandon? Brandon's silence was answer enough. Get him out of here, Carlton said to the security guards who'd appeared in the doorway. Escort him off the property. If he resists, call the police. As the guards approached, Brandon made one last desperate play. He grabbed my arm, his eyes pleading. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please don't let them do this. I'm still your son. And he was. That was the tragedy. Somewhere inside this manipulative, cruel man was the little boy I'd taught to ride a bike, the teenager I'd helped with homework, the young man I'd sent off to college with pride. But that boy was buried under years of lies and greed. and I couldn't dig him out. Only Brandon could do that, and he'd have to want to. "I love you," I said again, "but I can't protect you anymore." The guards led him away. Through the office windows, I could see them walking him through the parking lot to his car. Guests on the patio watched, confused. The fairy tale wedding was ending in public disgrace. Natalie sat back down, her wedding dress now wrinkled, her makeup smeared from tears she'd tried not to cry. "I'm sorry," I told her. "I know this isn't what you wanted for your wedding day." She looked up at me, and in her eyes I saw something unexpected. Gratitude. "You saved me," she said softly. "If this had come out in a year, or 5 years, or after we had children, it would have been so much worse. Thank you for having the courage to tell the truth." 3 months passed. Autumn arrived in Connecticut, painting the trees gold and crimson. I sat on the porch of a small but well-maintained house in a quiet neighborhood in Bloomfield, watching leaves drift across my modest yard. It was nothing fancy, but it was mine, paid for with some of the restitution money that had started arriving from the court-ordered settlement. Margaret visited every Tuesday afternoon. She'd pull up in her luxury sedan, always bringing something: flowers, fresh bread from her favorite bakery, once even a new rocking chair for the porch. Today she brought apple cider and homemade cookies. "How are you feeling?" she asked, settling into the rocking chair beside mine. "Good," I said, and meant it. "The surgery went well. Doctor says my heart is stronger than it's been in 20 years. The surgery. That had been the first thing I'd done with the restitution money. Brandon had been ordered to pay back the full $93,000 plus interest and penalties. Total amount, $108,200. The first installment came 6 weeks after the wedding disaster, pulled from Brandon's remaining assets after Natalie's annulment was finalized. I'd used $60,000 for the surgery I'd been putting off for years. A bypass procedure that my cardiologist said probably saved my life. The rest went into savings, a safety net for the first time since Emma died. "I'm glad," Margaret said warmly. "Emma would be relieved to know you're finally taking care of yourself." We'd had this conversation before, about Emma. Margaret had filled in stories I'd never known. Emma's dreams of becoming a principal someday, her secret love of terrible science fiction novels, her talent for making anyone feel heard and valued. "Why did you really help me?" I asked. It was a question I'd been working up the courage to ask for months. Margaret was quiet for a moment, sipping her cider. "Emma once told me something I've never forgotten. We were sophomores, studying for finals in our dorm room. I was stressed about money, about whether I could afford to stay in school. Emma looked at me and said, 'The measure of a person isn't their bank account or their social status. It's whether they lift others up or tear them down.' She turned to look at me. 'You spent your entire life lifting Brandon up, working 2 jobs, sacrificing your health, giving him every opportunity. He spent his adult life tearing you down, using you, stealing from you, erasing you. When I found out what he'd done, I knew I had to help balance those scales, for Emma's memory, for you.' A car drove past slowly, the driver waving. My neighbor Helen, heading to her afternoon book club. I waved back. I was part of a community now, not just invisible. "Have you heard from him?" Margaret asked gently. I nodded. "A letter came yesterday." I pulled it from my shirt pocket. I'd read it a dozen times, looking for something I wasn't sure was there. The letter was 3 pages long, handwritten. Brandon's penmanship had always been neat, precise. The letter detailed his last 3 months, moving back to a modest apartment, finding work at a small accounting firm willing to overlook his scandal, starting therapy twice a week. He didn't make excuses. He acknowledged the theft, the lies, the cruelty. He wrote about his therapist, helping him understand how he'd confused wealth with worth, status with value, how he'd become so obsessed with escaping his working-class background that he'd betrayed everything good about it. The letter ended with, "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm just asking for a chance to prove I can become the man Mom hoped I'd be, the man you deserved as a son." I understand if you never want to see me again, but I needed you to know I'm trying to change, and I'm sorry for everything. Will you respond? Margaret asked. I don't know, I said honestly. Part of me wants to. Part of me thinks it's too late. It's never too late for someone to change, Margaret said. But it's also never wrong to protect yourself first. You don't owe him anything, Stephen. A robin landed on the porch railing, cocked its head at us, then flew away. I watched it disappear into the maple tree at the edge of my yard. Emma's insurance money, I said. Her final gift. It wasn't just money, was it? No, Margaret agreed. It was a message. Take care of yourself. You've earned it. For 40 years, I'd believed my worth was measured by how much I could sacrifice for Brandon, how much I could give, how much I could endure, how invisible I could make myself so he could shine. I'd taught him through my actions that I didn't matter, that my needs, my health, my dignity were less important than his success, and he'd learned that lesson perfectly. But Emma's gift, delivered through Margaret's intervention, taught me something else. I mattered too. My health mattered. My dignity mattered. My life had value beyond what I could provide for others. I spent my whole life believing love meant sacrifice, I said aloud. That being a good father meant giving everything, asking for nothing. And what do you believe now? Margaret asked. That you can't earn love through sacrifice alone. Real love, the kind worth having, recognizes your worth without you having to prove it. Brandon couldn't see my value because I taught him I had none. I taught him I was a resource to be used, not a person to be cherished. The realization had come slowly, through quiet mornings on this porch, through conversations with Margaret, through the simple act of taking care of myself for the first time in decades. But here's what I also learned, I continued. It's never too late to reclaim your dignity. Never too late to say, I matter too. Whether Brandon ever becomes the man he should be isn't something I can control. What I can control is refusing to let his shame define me anymore. Margaret reached over and squeezed my hand. Emma would be proud of you. Maybe she would. I like to think so. I imagined her sitting with us on this porch. Her laughter carried on the autumn breeze. She'd always been better at boundaries than me, at knowing when to give and when to stand firm. If she were here, she'd probably tell me what took me so long to figure it out. A second letter arrived the following week. This one wasn't from Brandon. It was from Natalie. She'd moved to Boston, taken a position with a nonprofit organization focused on helping domestic violence survivors. The experience with Brandon, she wrote, had opened her eyes to manipulation and emotional abuse. She wanted to help others recognize the warning signs she'd missed. She thanked me for having the courage to speak up, for showing her what real character looked like, even when it cost everything. She was in therapy too, working through her own patterns of valuing status over substance. Your willingness to risk everything for the truth changed my life, she wrote. I hope you know how much it meant, how much you matter. I folded the letter and added it to the small box where I kept important things. Emma's wedding ring, some old photos, Margaret's business card, Brandon's apology letter. Maybe my public humiliation, my fight for dignity, my refusal to stay silent, maybe it mattered beyond just me. Maybe speaking truth, even when it destroys everything, ripples outward in ways we never see. Margaret and I finished our cider as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Tomorrow she'd go back to running her empire, making deals, building her legacy. I'd go back to my quiet life. Doctor's appointments, lunch with neighbors, tending my small garden. But every Tuesday, she'd come back. Emma's old friend, watching over Emma's husband, honoring a promise made at a funeral 23 years ago. I thought about everything I'd learned, everything I wished I'd known when Brandon was young. Maybe I could have raised him differently, taught him that character mattered more than wealth, that integrity was its own success. Or maybe not. Maybe Brandon's choices were his own, shaped by forces beyond my control. All I knew for certain was this: real wealth isn't in your bank account or your social status. It's in knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone, even your own child, convince you otherwise. Emma knew that. Margaret knew that. And finally, after 67 years, I knew it too. The robin returned to my porch railing, this time with a twig in its beak, building something new, starting over. I smiled and raised my cider glass in a silent toast. To Emma, to Margaret, to second chances and hard-won dignity, to the truth, even when it costs everything, to knowing, finally, that I mattered too. Now, I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to choose between protecting someone you love and standing up for yourself? Have you ever felt invisible in your own family? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart or made you think about your own relationships differently, please consider liking this video and sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe to the channel for more stories about real people facing real challenges, and remember, your worth doesn't depend on what you can give others. You matter just as you are. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps you remember your own value, and that you never let anyone, no matter how much you love them, make you invisible. Take care of yourselves out there. You deserve it.